Welcome to the Holistic Health Show, where the worlds of science and spirituality converge to illuminate a path towards total well-being. Join us as we embark on a journey to bridge the gap between Western medicine and complementary therapies. Hello, welcome back to the Holistic Health Show. It's been a while, and I'm excited to be back with you today. And today we have Deb Sharpe. Deb is a master practitioner and teacher with the Australian Bushflower Essence Foundation. So this is something that's a little bit new to me. I know some things about essential oils, and I love using essential oils in my practice, in my personal life. But when it comes to the Australian bushflower essences, I am a newbie. So thank you, Deb, so much for joining us on the show today. I would love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started with this.
Oh, thank you, Amy. It's a pleasure to be on the show. I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to be able to share some information about the bushflower essences because they seem to be a little hidden gem that Australia has. It really surprises me on a regular basis, when I get starting to talk to people about what I do and the flower essences that, they're not all that well known considering that they have been around really for, nearly close to 50 years now. I first got introduced to flower essences from my naturopath when I became a parent, and I was just looking for complementary therapy for my children. And at that time, in the early 1990s, I got introduced to bark flower remedies. And bark flower remedies originated in the UK. They were quite helpful for my son at the time who had issues with the eustachian tubes in his ears after having severe tonsillitis. And my naturopath suggested that we try those. And then I used also another remedy called Rescue Remedy, which is a bark flower remedy as well. And a lot of people might be familiar with that. You can actually buy that on the shelves in some supermarkets now and chemists.
I can remember going to my grandmother's house when I was quite young, and she'd always had the Rescue Remedy out.
Yeah.
Quite common, I think, that one.
And funny enough, at that time in the 90s, that's when Ian White was starting to get the Australian version of that up and running. And he's a fifth generation herbalist and naturopath. And he decided to get really involved in sharing his knowledge that he'd learned from his grandmother in particular. When he returned home from an overseas trip and had an illness there and was looking into alternative options, complementary options, to support with Western medicine. And then he became really passionate and it just took over from there.
It's amazing the natural resources that we can find if we look out for them and kind of open our eyes and our learnings to them. I'm really curious, which Australian flowers are the ones that we're using.
Well, the flower that the Australian bushflower essence uses, their main emblem is Waratah. Waratah's in a lot of the blends that you can purchase at health food stores. And from, I call it ABFE for short, from the ABFE website. Yeah, so one I use quite a bit is Waratah. I'll just show you the card if you can see that there. Yeah.
It's quite pretty, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And Waratah in particular is for strength and courage to cope in situations, and that's actually a key ingredient in emergency essence, which is the Australian equivalent to Rescue Remedy.
What are the other options that we have? Do they all have these clever little names, or is it just the emergency one that does?
There are blends that you can buy at health food shops that have they're easy to use options and they're readily available for us. So we have blends such as Relationship Essence, Adol Essence, which is really good to support adolescents, during the transition period that they have in that phase of life. There's another one called Transition Essence, which also supports us through various transitions that we might have, even something like end of life, when someone is terminally ill, transition essence can help them and the family to cope during periods of time like that.
And I would
Yeah.
imagine even, being a new parent myself, thinking about that transition for myself and my husband, perhaps even at that stage of life, it could be something that can help you cope with all of those changes or maybe menopause even.
Yep, yep, yep. Kids going to school, first days at school, things like that. Yeah, yeah. So there's 71 flower essences now. There were 69 for quite a few years, and then Ian released 2 recently. Caliphyllum, which supports leadership in supporting others, that was released recently, and also sedum, which is the first essence that he actually made overseas. It's grown in Corsica, and that supports connection to our higher self.
And so, how do you take all of these? Do you dilute them and ingest them? Are they diffused, or is it a combination?
They're not diffused. There are a number of ways that you can take them, but perhaps it's a good idea to just talk briefly about the difference between them and essential oils, because I find that's where a lot of people do get confused when I do talk about Australian bushflower essences. So essential oils, they differ quite significantly from flower essences because they are, as the name suggests, oils. They're extracted or pressed directly from the flower or the plant and used for aromatherapy purposes. Whereas the Australian bushflower essences, it's more of like an alchemical type process where when Ian makes what we call the mother tincture, which is the main stock essence, which he then dilutes into these particular stock essences that you'll buy from ABFE. He uses the 4 elements. So he selects particular flowers and then removes the flower petals from the plants and puts them in a bowl of water. So you're using the element of water in a glass bowl in direct sunlight. They're left in direct sunlight for a period of time, a matter of hours, upon the earth. So it might be upon the soil or it might be upon a rock at a particular location in the open air. So that in fact you're using the 4 elements: water, earth, fire for the sun, and air. And then it's an energy exchange that occurs. The water is strained and then it's preserved in a bottle with pure preservative brandy. And then that actually results in what we call the mother tincture being obtained. And then from there, as I said, then it gets diluted into the stock strength. And then from there, when you purchase a stock strength bottle, then you can dilute it down into what we call a dose strength. So a dose strength, you use pure still water. That itself is a carrier, the carrier for the process for the energy exchange. So I've got here, just to show you that I've got some pure still water here, one of the dose bottles, and then we can select whichever flower essence that we're drawn to, and we put 7 drops of the flower essence into the dose bottle, and then we use a quota of, I generally use 1/4. If I'm going to use preservative brandy, I'll use 1/4 brandy, and then I'll use the remainder to fill a 15 ml bottle with the pure still water. And when you do make up a dose strength, you can make up using 1 flower essence, or you can use up to potentially 5, as long as they all are related to the one issue that you're looking at.
If we could just go back, just so I can get clear on a few things. When you're making the dose strengths in this little bottle that you have there, that's not 1 dose, though, in that bottle. That's what a prescription say.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah. And The recommended dosage is 7 drops under the tongue twice a day.
I see.
Yeah, and a 15 ml bottle on the average would potentially last you 2 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
Mm.
And then you mentioned you can use up to 5 of the essences for the one issue.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't say mix them, if I had a few things going on. Say if I was anxious and going through a transition phase, would you be able to mix for those, or you would need 2 separate doses?
Ideally, you'd focus on the one issue. You'd make a priority as to what's your main issue at the moment, and that's where it comes in that it might be good to just have some reflective time, perhaps meditate on it for a little while and contemplate what is the issue that you're really wanting to deal with at this time.
And I suppose working
Yeah.
with a practitioner like yourself could kind of help be a guide during that process and figuring out what really to add inside those vials. Because I myself certainly wouldn't be able to look at all 71 and think, well, this is what I need today. I would
Yeah.
certainly need some assistance.
Yeah. And that's where what I just showed you, the insight cards, there's a deck of insight cards that you can get. And I quite often give people the opportunity to choose their own flower essences, particularly the children. I find children really enjoy, spreading out the cards, whether it be on the table, like one behind me, or even on the floor. They spread the cards out, and then we have a look and see what jumps out. Might be the colour that might be resonating with them. It's really amazing, to see what does unfold, when you give people that opportunity to actually just tap into the energy of the flower, because it's an energy exchange. That's how the flowers are basically working with us. It's the same when you go out for a walk in nature, and you might, if you're fortunate enough to be able to go for a bushwalk where there are some bush flowers growing, and then we feel so much better after being for a walk in nature, and then that validates to how the flower essence actually they work with our energy, because it's from a vibrational frequency perspective, and as we just spoke about, the process of making the flower essences is a energy exchange, and it actually, what you're left with, with the water that's left, is the vibrational signature of the flower. Its healing potential, because when a plant flowers, the flower holds the highest amount of energy. It takes so much for that little flower to actually reach that peak and burst into flower, and then it's sharing that high frequency energy with us when we do have that interaction with them, when we're taking them. So they work on the subtle bodies of our energy system. It's got a lot, the foundation of it really is related to vibrational energy, vibrational medicine. And the concept of that, the key concept is that human beings are multi-dimensional beings, and there's more to us than just simply a physical body and a brain.
So would it have anything to do with, direct impacts on the chakras? Are there particular flower essences that would correspond to each chakra?
They all correspond to individual chakras. Yeah, they're classified, Amy, according to each of the 7 major chakras, and they're activated through that interaction via the meridian system of the body.
Yeah, it makes sense if they're quite vibrational. It brings me back to, I'm thinking about just the process you explained of creating the mother tincture. That itself must be very therapeutic and very grounding, and just being in nature while you're doing that and accessing all this vibration.
Yeah, that's right. Well, personally, I haven't had the opportunity to do that, but we do get the opportunity to see and do that firsthand. So I've actually got that on my wish list.
Can manifest that one.
Yeah, and during that workshop, you actually have the opportunity to go on a bushwalk and you can watch him actually do that process and be involved to that degree in making the flower essence.
So every single one of these essences that one would purchase are all made by Ian?
Yes,
Oh,
yes,
wow.
yeah. He travels Australia, yeah, and across the world teaching, but and as I said, the first flower essence that he has created overseas was released last year, and it's called Sedum in Corsica.
I'm really intrigued by these, and I can't wait. We're actually going on a bushwalk tomorrow, so I can't wait to go out. Can you access the flowers themselves online to see which ones are? Yeah, yeah, I'm going to have a little peek later.
Yeah, there's all information about all of the individual remedies and all of the blends, educational workshops online and in person that are coming up.
And anyone who wanted to get started or ask more questions about this, is this something that you do consultations on? How does one get, further information?
Well, you could either email myself for any assistance or and look up my website, Reminiscence Natural Therapies. I'm willing to answer any questions that I can. And really, the other option is to make contact with Sharon. She's the coordinator at ABFE.
Okay, great. I'm going to actually share all those links in the description of the episode. So all of you who are listening and are as intrigued as I am by this, just reach out to Deb or reach out to Sharon, comment on the video if you're watching on YouTube. But yeah, definitely ask those questions and see how these could potentially help you through any transition periods or any issues that you or your family may be going through. Deb, thank you so much for joining us today. And before we go, I just want to make sure there's nothing else that you wanted to add or, there's something else we should cover.
No, not particularly. Really, just to say too that the flower essences work on an emotional level quite powerfully. So, they're worth considering in that respect, but also realizing too that, emotions are there to be felt. They're not to covered up or anything like that. But yeah, these complementary therapies are there to support us through anything that we're dealing with.
It can be incredibly challenging working through our emotions, but the result tends to be a lot better than when we bottle them up. I'm
Mm,
sure we can all relate to some sort of experience with ourselves or someone we know who bottle up our emotions, and it tends to overflow pretty quickly.
it does. Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity, Amy.
Thank you, Deb. It was really, really nice to talk to you today. And thank you for sharing Australian bushflower essence information with us. Thanks for joining me on the Holistic Health Show and trusting me to guide you towards proactive healthcare. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to subscribe now on your favorite podcast platform and get ready to embark on an incredible journey toward holistic wellness. Until next time, be well and stay holistic.